I think part of the notification overload problem is also just not having this trust with the company. So I think it's not purely a technology problem, but more and more products and apps and services would have to sort of win that trust of their customers by giving them these options and making them believe that the organization really is putting the customers in front of their own goals.
Hello and welcome back to Vstudio. I'm Alex Reed, Chief Commercial Officer at vSimple, and I'm joined today by an amazing guest, Hana Mohan with MagicBell. Hana, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just get right into it. Why MagicBell? Tell us a little bit about the company, why you started it, what the vision was. Give us a little bit of the background.
Sure. So I've been a developer for over 10 years now, and I've been an entrepreneur building my own applications. And the last one I built was a customer support software called SupportBee. And because, there were a lot of emails going back and forth, we built email notifications for that. And then we started improving it and adding in-app notifications. And I think I just realized that, wow, this is probably the second or third time I'm building exactly the same thing. It always looks simpler than it really is. And there really should be a service out there. And I honestly kept waiting for a few years. I kept thinking someone's going to build it. And then I was at a point where I was looking for something new to do. And I figured, okay, might as well do this. And, here we are.
That feels like a little bit of a classic entrepreneur's, story of you solved the problem that you were experiencing personally. And it's such a universal issue, it seems, this constant bombardment of notifications, whether it's text messages, emails, Slack, WhatsApp. I know I fall victim of it too. And it's amazing, though, to me how pervasive it is in the workplace. So what is your perception of the landscape? Obviously, communication tools have proliferated over the last decade as these technologies have come online. What have been sort of the second order effects? How are companies dealing with it? Just share a little bit of your perspective on that challenge more broadly.
Sure. So I think historically people have kind of, looked at notifications as an afterthought. So, you build your feature, you build the workflows you want to build, and then you layer on some notifications to it. And personally, we are really excited about that future where notifications are an integral part of the workflow. They are thought out in advance. And another belief that we have at the company is the in-app notifications are actually the most important one. And by in-app, I actually mean like a notification inbox where your users can log in and check what is it that they need to pay attention to. It's almost like the starting screen for your software. So we have these two beliefs, and that's what guides us. And we are excited about this future where notifications are not seen as alerts. They're seen as little, I don't know if the word applet or little pieces of the UI that work cross-platform and actually help you get more work done. I think today we have to manage a lot of these notifications in our mind. So they show up on our home screen on the phone. Most apps don't really have an inbox. So if you lose them, then you wonder what that notification was, or they pop up when you log into an app in literally a pop-up and you dismiss them. So we're really trying to move away from that world where notifications are treated kind of like this fire and forget and let users worry about them, to this world where you are confident that an app has your notifications well managed and you're not gonna miss out on something important.
Yeah, it's sort of the Wild West. I mean, there's a lot going on, and it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like what your focus is really not the notification delivery itself, but more of the intelligence engine behind that. How do we motivate? Notify people? Where do we notify them? When do we notify them? Being able to actually put some intelligence and thought behind that. Do you, with your customers and the demand that you're seeing for MagicBell, is that a big part of it, or is it still very early stages for kind of figuring out all of that configuration?
I'd say that's actually most of our customers, right? Even including vSimple, it's companies that are actually thinking deeply about the notification experience. And I like to say that people or product managers or engineers who are thinking about notifications are definitely sort of leading this edge. I think it's going to trickle down to the mainstream companies. And we're also like recently starting to see a lot of these kind of legacy applications, whether it's employee management or invoicing or something. Some of these project managers come to us and say, we are overhauling our application and we really want to improve notifications this time. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of it, but it's still probably, I'd say maybe 5 out of the 100 companies are today thinking about improving their notifications. But I do believe that this is only going to increase over time.
That's great. Yeah, so there's still a ton of opportunity out there. And especially, I think the world is in an interesting place right now where we're figuring out, remote, hybrid, in person, synchronous work versus asynchronous work. What is MagicBell doing to help companies, or is MagicBell really helping them think through those strategies? Because there almost has to be some premeditation before I can figure out the delivery method. It's how do I want my teams to work? So what is your role? What is MagicBell's role in really helping companies figure out how to work smarter, better, more efficiently?
So like you said, we are not so focused on the actual delivery. And by that, what I mean is there are companies like Twilio or SendGrid that have kind of existed as this pipe. So if you just want to send an email, you can use them. Like what we are focused on is actually the sort of that intelligence on which channel the notification should go to. Should we wait before we deliver it on another channel? Should we remove it from, let's say, a mobile screen if you've already seen it in app? And I think the reality of the work is that work is kind of multi-platform, multi-surface, multi-device right now. I think we all work from home now. We all work from the move. And more applications are going to think about how does that experience really translate. So you're not going to have exactly the same experience on mobile as you have on the web. Maybe the primary focus on mobile is to enable people to unblock their coworkers while they're away from work. So I think each app would have to sit down and like really think about what are their goals with these different surfaces, what kind of use cases are the most important ones, and which of these can simply be an intelligent and a smart notification. So does a user really have to log into your mobile app and enter the mobile app and then press an approval button, or can they just have an approval button on the notification itself? Or for example, like a common example of that is WhatsApp. You can reply to a notification by long pressing and actually typing a text. I don't know if a lot of people know about that, but I think people will have to put in more thought into what notifications do they want to send out? What's the goal they want the users to accomplish? Does it involve the users coming back to the app? Can it be done in place? Which things actually require them to log into the app, whether it's mobile or desktop? And you're right. I think there are not that many established practices here. And we are hoping that we can contribute meaningfully to that dialogue. And we can first pose the question and then with visionary customers also kind of find some answers. We are still very early in this journey, but I think we already solved like quite a few problems with respect to more granular notification preferences or just not sending the same notification to multiple channels if it's already been seen. But there's a long way to go. Like I think over time we would love to do more machine learning and personalize these kind of delivery rules for each user. And I'm very excited about that future.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's early days and there's a ton of potential. So I'm excited to see where everything goes. Do you see a big difference today between organization types, whether it's size or industry, in terms of what they really need to be successful from a communication and notification standpoint, or is it pretty, monolithic across the board?
I do think that larger organizations tend to think a bit more about the notification volume because they know they have different departments who are sending notifications. And also, I mean, if you look at from the perspective of a customer, whether they're receiving a newsletter or they're receiving a notification for a project that they're working on, ultimately it's coming from the same company. And I think sometimes we tend to think of it as like, okay, this notification is the responsibility of the marketing team and this one of the customer success team. But I think one of the challenges I think that exists today in the tool set is all these different systems that are kind of very independent of each other sending notifications. So you really have a very hard time implementing any kind of policies. And this definitely becomes like a bigger challenge with bigger organizations. So it's something we don't really solve today in terms of the policies, but it is something in our probably like a 1 year roadmap or, in perhaps in a few quarters. But for a small organization, I think they don't have these challenges, but I think their challenge is more in terms of how do we go multi-platform from day one, or how do we, with the limited resources that we have, like craft out the best notification strategy. So yeah, I think they do differ a little bit. Fundamentally, it's the same spectrum of problems, but I think the timing of problems and the sort of intensity of the problem changes between the size of the organization.
Well, I've asked a lot of questions around the organization and how we think about making them more successful and productive. Let's switch gears for a minute and talk about the individual. Notification anxiety is real because I know I feel it every day. And like I said, sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's professional, but you get inundated with messages from lots of different platforms. How are you working to help the individual? Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Companies want the individuals to be empowered, successful, properly motivated, properly informed, all of those things. So, talk a little bit about it from their perspective, the individual users.
Sure. I think sometimes the solution is actually simpler than it seems like. And in our opinion, it is, again, right? Like think about the goals that you have with your notifications. Think about the different categories of notifications you're sending. Try to categorize them well, and then make it very easy for people to sort of opt out of notifications they don't want. A good example of that is actually the news feed, right? Like if you are on a social network, the news feed is quite overwhelming, but there are a lot of controls in terms of like lowering down the volume of some notifications or just completely opting out of certain kinds of notifications. And the way we see notifications evolve is very similar, that it's hard to like sort of guess what a user wants. And at first you might send a few more notifications, but if they can quickly opt out and they can quickly personalize their experience, also their trust grows.
Yeah.
I think part of the notification overload problem is also just not having this trust with the company. So I think it's not purely a technology problem, but more and more products and apps and services would have to sort of win that trust of their customers by giving them these options and making them believe that the organization really is putting the customers in front of their own goals.
I love that.
I think we have to kind of move. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. I'm sorry to cut you off. What I think I'm hearing you say is you almost want the individual to train the system by providing the feedback and the inputs to make it great for them, giving them that empowerment. Is that accurate?
I think especially more so for business and work apps, because fundamentally, even compared to, let's say, something like an Instagram, you like if your customers of vSimple inherently do want to be notified about the right things. So they are going to cut you a little bit more slack early on, knowing that you don't know precisely what they want, and they would want to invest that time in building that relationship with your product. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Maybe it's like lesser so with B2C apps, because people can turn off notifications and still go and catch up on whatever they need. But I think in case of B2B apps, yes, definitely, like products should offer these kind of ways for customers to tell them what they're interested in.
That's fascinating because you made me think about the fact that notifications in maybe the old way of thinking about it was on or off, right? I either want to be notified or I don't, but having conditions like who's notifying me, how high of a priority is the project, who's the customer, if it's a customer related project, or who's, what product line, it could be anything. I could be in engineering, sales, marketing. And depending on my job, certain things, I'm going to want that notification to get pushed through and get my attention. But in other situations, it's like, no, that's a tomorrow thing. I'd rather not even know about it until tomorrow. So I think the trends are going that direction, but you're right. From my own personal using experience of a lot of these apps, I know that opportunity isn't there. So with MagicBell, how big are you thinking? Are you focused on enterprise, on startups, on consumer? Like, where do you want to take the company? Because there's a big world of potential as relates to, again, notification intelligence.
So we are starting to get a lot more of the enterprise and upmarket interest, and definitely we are pursuing it because those are like deals that bring a lot of revenue. They also bring sort of a different kind of feedback. Having said that, I do think like a lot of the unicorns of tomorrow are being minted today at places like Y Combinator and Techstars and the incubators. So we hope we can solve the problems in a way that actually works for most people. But yeah, that's all I can say
Yeah.
today. Let's see how things go in
Yeah,
some
yeah, no,
time.
I
Yeah,
know the plight of the early stage startup, right? Where everything's an opportunity,
exactly.
and sometimes you let your customers lead you to, the path of most success. So that's fantastic. I'm going to ask.
I'd
Oh, go
say,
ahead.
sorry, I'd say that more than the size of the company, we are definitely interested in these kind of use cases where people are trying to modernize their application or bring like a very collaborative workflow to their application. So we are kind of more interested in pursuing whether this is happening at a large company or at a small company, people who are sort of like, again, right, like not just adding a bell to their product and calling it a day, but like modeling topics and unsubscriptions and preferences. And so I think the quality of the use case matters a lot. And so you can surprisingly find it at a large company, or you may not find it even at a small company, right? Like, so I think a lot of our products are driven, I don't know about you, I would love to hear, but they're sort of more driven by the visionary customers than sort of like I would say a vertical niche or something.
Yeah, and I completely understand. We see applications in very large businesses and kind of medium sized businesses, and a lot of times it depends on what they do and what they're trying to accomplish. But there is a universality, I think, to the problems we're trying to solve where, yeah, who doesn't have an issue with too much communication, or maybe not, it's too much. It's impossible to filter, right? I don't know what's a priority or what I need to tackle first, or even if I'm supposed to take an action. So I was notified. Does that mean I have responsibility for it? So there's a lot of work to do on work, which leads me to kind of my big question for you. And I like to always have, kind of a prediction section towards the end of conversations. But when you think about communication and business communication specifically, what do you think it's going to look like in 10 years? What are some predictions or thoughts that you have in terms of how different it's going to be 10 years from now than it is today?
I'm usually not very good at like 10-year projections, but I do kind of strongly believe that if you look at some of the components that people use in building their applications, whether it's sign in, and now Google sign in has become kind of so ubiquitous, or GitHub sign in, and it's almost like people start, or Stripe payments or Shopify pay, people almost like start trusting a new product more because they feel comfortable handing off their credit card to Shopify, or they feel better like signing in through Google because they know it's going to work well, their passwords won't be stolen. I do think a similar shift will happen with notifications as well, where some of the companies like MagicBell, I hope it's MagicBell, but it could be someone else as well, who out executes us perhaps, will end up like owning that end user trust, where if people see that bell and that branding on these products, they're going to be more comfortable knowing, okay, I can trust this brand with my notifications, and I know they will provide me with all the right options. So that's one of the predictions I have. And again, it ties really well into the prediction that I made early on, which is the in-app inbox is going to be the most important channel. You would still send emails or SMS, but it'd be like once in a while instead of it being kind of like the default medium. I think this kind of coupling of email and notifications that happened since forever, because that's where the user's attention is. So it's almost like we are hacking that attention. I think and I hope that email and notifications decouple, so you can just use emails for communicating with human beings, and you can use notifications in a much better way to communicate with applications.
That's fantastic. And And Hannah, I love what you all are doing. This conversation was so fun. I think big things are in your all's future, and I'm excited that we get to be a small part of that. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective, your wisdom with us and our audience, and all the best to you and the MagicBell team.
Thank you.